I'm just gonna turn on the Facebook Live. Yeah, go ahead, Siobhan.
So welcome everyone. My name is Siobhan Bernerat and I am the owner of Adams and Butler. And we specialise, as you know, in Ireland, the UK and in Africa. But we do have a passion for Northern Ireland in the office. So we're delighted to visit the wonderful homes, gardens in Northern Ireland. And who better to introduce them to us and tell us all about the history and the culture and the connections in Northern Ireland than Marianne Gorman, who is the specialist for those wonderful properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight over to Marianne Gorman. So she will do an introduction about why you should send your clients, or indeed you yourselves should visit. And then she will give you a sort of a sense of place about each property, and some of the properties that she's included in this itinerary will also be featured here and will present, so that you get to meet the hosts who will look after you on your travels, or your clients when they're traveling. So Marianne, can you tell us about why people should come to Northern Ireland and the hidden delights that wait for us there?
Well, with total pleasure, because actually when I was thinking about this, I got so excited about the north of Ireland, I wanted to go there immediately and just abandon the webinar. But Northern Ireland really is the very essence of ancient Ireland. And when you enter into Northern Ireland, you are going to experience what it is that really makes up Ireland. It's full of the ancient legends of Ireland. It's full of connections with St. Patrick. St. Patrick arrived there, he was taken there by the O'Neills and the O'Donnells at the end of the Roman Empire from Wales. He was a Roman Welsh, a Roman British boy of 16 years of age. He was brought on as a shepherd onto the Flemish mountains, and he stayed there as a shepherd for 6 years. And then he had a voice in his head which told him to run down to the southeast of Ireland and take a boat from there and go off to France, where he was trained as a priest by Saint-Germain de l'Auxerre. And then another, unfortunately for him, voice came into his ear and told him he must now go back to Ireland, which he did, follow that voice. And in 432, he came in, winds, I think, blew him across to Strangford Lough, which we will be going down on the way to see Grey Abbey. And that was in 432. It's a 30-kilometer long sea loch. And he is the man who seamlessly introduced the Christian religion into Ireland. I say seamlessly because he incorporated and respected a lot of the ancient pagan druidic beliefs here, and just changed a druidic place of worship into a Christian place of worship. And he is buried in Downpatrick in the north of Ireland, and the seat of the Roman Catholic Church in Ireland for the Cardinal is in Armagh in the north of Ireland. So apart from St. Patrick, all of the ancient legends, or many of them, are connected with the north of Ireland, including the famous Finn McCool, who we will meet on the Causeway Coast when we wend our way to Benvarden Gardens, and also Cuchulainn, who is the magic, both of them magic giants. And Cuchulainn, it is said, defended the men of Ulster from the encroachment of the Queen coming over to try and take a white bull from the west of Ireland, Queen Maeve, a white bull from a farmer in the north of Ireland. And Cuchulainn defends the whole of the army of the north of Ireland, who are put under a spell of sleepiness and can't fight. And he is the only one able to fight. And the only way their enemies know he's dead is when a raven comes, perches on his shoulder and sips the blood from his shoulder, and they know he's actually dead. He's still fighting even though dead. And the north of Ireland is also heavily associated, as we probably know, with the linen industry. It was the French Huguenots who arrived over here after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, who developed the linen industry, and many of the towns in the north of Ireland really sprang up because of the strong linen industry. And it is fascinating to think of this, you know, the circle of the north of Ireland, because the Scoti, who are a very warlike tribe in the north of in Ireland, went off to Scotland and formed what is now Scotland. And then when in the 17th century, the people, major tribes in the north of Ireland, the O'Neills and the O'Donnells, rose against the British power, they had to flee Ireland, and the tentacles of the Anglican Church in Britain were reaching out to force all the dissenters, particularly the Presbyterians, who are now mainly in Scotland, to convert to the Anglican religion or else have no civil rights. They in turn come over to escape from all of that into the north of Ireland. And that's around the 1606 period. So many of the families that we will meet today in our journey relate to this arrival of the Scots-Irish, Scots-Irish into Northern Ireland, and built these great houses that we will experience and delight in. And you have extraordinarily, of the many presidents of America, 10 presidents of America who are Scots-Irish. And I'm not counting John F. Kennedy amongst these, because he wasn't Scots-Irish. But you have people like Ulysses Simpson Grant, you have Chester Alan Arthur, Buchanan, many others, and Woodrow Wilson, whose farm is still being farmed by the Wilson family here in the north of Ireland. You have also the most extraordinary people, and many of them strangely came from that area, Fermanagh, where we'll be visiting castles like Barons Court, which is just on the border of Tyrone, Fermanagh, and Crum Castle, and Belle Isle, of course, and the wonderful houses of Castlecool and Florence Court. And from this area, you have the Lamont family who came from there, Judge Thomas Mellon, who at the age of 5 left with his parents for America. And the reason these families started to leave at this stage was because, again, those long tentacles of the Protestant church had infiltrated the north of Ireland. And now they were doing the same, trying to force the dissenters there to convert to the Anglican religion. And you also have General Stonewall Jackson, who came from the north of Ireland. You have Davy Crockett, who came from the north of Ireland. The Mellon family came back to do wonderful things in Fermanagh in opening up the Ulster American Folk Park, which is set up by the Mellon family to show their connections with the north of Ireland. And you also have Edgar Allan Poe. I was nearly forgetting him, so I've just looked up his name just to remind myself of him, who came from the north of Ireland. So there is incredible connections between America, between Canada, and between the north of Ireland. They really were the frontiersmen, these Scots-Irish who went off to America in that period. And really, when you think of it, 6 of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence in America were from the north of Ireland, were Scots-Irish. And the printer of the Declaration of Independence was John Dunlop, from the north of Ireland, from Strabane. So amazing intertwining. And really, when you go to the north of Ireland, if you're from Canada or America, you really feel you're home again. It's an extraordinary connection, deep connection, a deep-rooted connection. And the game of hurling, which is considered the oldest, which is known as the oldest and the fastest field sport in the world, it originated also in the north of Ireland, because that hero, Cuchulainn, who when he was dying was still fighting, he originally was called Setanta, and the king of Ulster, passing by to visit the famous blacksmith Cuchulainn, saw this young boy showing inordinate prowess in hurling, but they didn't call it hurling that time, but a curved stick and a brass ball, which he was playing with, and asked him, would he, as a show-off piece, would he come with him to have dinner at the house of Cuchulainn. And Setanta said, well, not quite now, but I will follow you. And follow him he did, but he was late and the king had forgotten all about him. And the gates were closed, and Setanta decided he would clamber over the gate to get in. And whilst he was clambering over the gate, a great big terrifying hound with bared teeth came out to attack him. And he took out his curved stick and he hit his ball straight into the throat of the dog and killed the dog instantly. And when the blacksmith Cuchulainn came out and looked with horror and very distraught at the sight of his dog lying on the ground dead, Setanta, seeing this, said, I will be your hound. And that's how he got the name of Cuchulainn, the Hound of Cuchulainn. Didn't remain long as his hound, but then he became this inordinate figure of huge prowess. So you are now going down Strangford Lough when you go to Grey Abbey, and I just wanted to describe a little bit of this. You enter into Belfast. Let us not throw away Belfast on the way, because Belfast has a huge amount of things to look at. It's a city really which came to its fore in around 1900, when it was really one of the most important cities anywhere in boat building and also in rope making. And one of the most famous boats that was built in Belfast, of course, in 1909 was the Titanic, which set off on its ill-fated voyage, built in the shipyards of Harland and Wolff. And they have now a Titanic Centre there. The building is stunning in itself. It's very much in the style of Frank Gehry, whose building I loved when I went to Chicago. And he also did the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, and many of you know him. And it's a fascinating exhibition on the building of the Titanic. Then we leave Belfast, we go down by Strangford Lough. Here it was, as I said earlier, St. Patrick. Sorry, I just stop this. The Strangford Lough itself is very, very interesting. It's, as I said earlier, 30 kilometre long loch, sea loch, and it has incredible wildlife on it. It has a wonderful island very near it called Swan Island, which is full of terns, Arctic terns, roseate terns, common terns, all sorts of terns, and it's very close to the shore. So you can actually see these birds erupting literally from Swan Island. And then we go down towards Grey Abbey. Daphne Montgomery, wife of Bill Montgomery, who owned Grey Abbey, is going to talk to you about the Abbey. The Montgomerys, again, a Scots-Irish family, have been here since 1606, which is when all of those Scots-Irish people came over in the 17th century. And what is extraordinary also about Grey Abbey, as well as a beautiful garden, is this amazing, gets its name from it, this amazing Cistercian abbey from the early 12th century, which was under the patronage of the de Courcy family. His wife, John de Courcy's wife, was a lady called Africa, and she was the one who was the patron of the Cistercian monastery in Grey Abbey. And it is still a magnificent ruin. I'm sure Daphne will show us a little bit of that ruin. And it has also got, the Montgomerys have very distinguished ancestors in the Montgomery, Field Marshal Montgomery, who was a very distinguished military man, and his plaque to Field Marshal Montgomery is in the Abbey itself. And the welcome that you get when you go to Grey Abbey and sitting under this luscious, what they call Strawberry Hill Gothic decoration in the dining room, which you feel as if you're in some very exotic, ornate tent. Somebody called Strawberry Hill Gothic, like sitting under the udders of a cow in stucco work, but it's absolutely phenomenally beautiful. So I'd like to leave you now to talk with Daphne, and then we will continue on.
So just to introduce Daphne, we have been to Grey Abbey before, and we concentrated on the house and the wonderful history of the house and you know, the stories about the ghost and stuff like that. So this time, Daphne's going to tell us about the garden, and we do have images. So Daphne, you tell us when you want us to show the images. You need to turn on the, you need to unmute yourself, Daphne, as well.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. And thank you, Marianne, for that wonderful. It's always lovely to be reminded of the Irish and indeed the Northern Irish history right through. Thank you so much for that again. When filling in little gaps that I hadn't realized. So here we are in Grey Abbey, and I'm actually sitting in a sort of slight force 9 gale at the moment, because I thought it would be nice to see the back of the house, for the view from the back of the house, which is the original Georgian landscape. And if I do this, I hope you might be able to see the Abbey.
We do.
But we have some images for you, and that will sell it all. And of course, yeah, so Marianne told us a small amount of the Abbey, which is actually just, it's such a long story originally, starting with Henry II sending his Norman knights over from England. And so to see the Mara and the king of Mara, and so and to defeat him, who he was fighting with his neighbor, the King of Leinster. And from these sort of rather barbaric moments, overcame the Norman knights, and John de Courcy was certainly one of them. A lot of them came from the Welsh marches in England, Wales. And so John de Courcy, with Queen Africa, his wife, founded the Abbey. And so Marianne, you really filled in what happened. And so, and the Montgomerys then took it from the O'Neills originally. And so here we are. And the family has been here for 400 years. And of course, the Abbey is an incredibly precious building and foundation to us. Our 3 daughters got married in the Abbey, and it's very, very special, very worth a visit.
Will we get some picture? I'll get the first presentation with a couple of pictures, just so get people an idea. And then we've got more pictures on a second one. So
maybe if you can talk us through the photos as well, Daphne.
Yes, that's right. Well, we've got the Abbey, and actually you'll have to tell me what they are, because there's so much light falling on my...
Well, do you just want to flick through them slowly, Gio, maybe?
yes.
Yes, I can hear. Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the main Abbey. And then we have some of the house first, isn't it?
Yes, I expect so.
So Gio, if you want to go through them there. Yeah.
I dropped my camera. We are. So yes, if you show the images of the house now.
So we're seeing the photos of the bedroom. We saw a photo there of Bill reading a newspaper, and now we're going into the garden. Beautiful color.
Yes, so here we've got the granary border. Yes, and what, tell me what they're removing. Oh yeah. Down to the Abbey. Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. The Abbey again. Yes.
And then that's do you want to go into the other one, Giovanna?
Yes.
The gardens. And then what's important to remember as well is that Daphne and Bill will host clients when they're visiting for, you know, lunches, etc., private visits. And again, it's something that is ungoogleable. It's something special, something unique to be hosted by the owners of these wonderful stately properties.
Hear, hear.
Yes. Well, I can tell you the gardens were formed in the late Victorian era by was a famous Irish garden designer, and behind me would have been a parterre, but made in the Victorian age, but now it's restored to its original Georgian landscape, which is takes in the lie of the land, trees on either side, and a ha-ha, which we call the sunk fence, which means that the pasture came straight up to the house. And that's a very Georgian feature. During the war, the whole of the garden really was neglected. And so my parents-in-law tried to get the whole thing together, very difficult after the war. And so it wasn't until Bill and I married in 1965, someone said to me, this is the best part of the British Isles for temperate climate plants. And so when I reared my children, I got going. And so it's really, we married in 1965, and about 1975, I started the garden. So it's fairly young, but of course, with this very good climate, everything grows incredibly well. Our son was in Chile for 4 years. And when we went to visit him, we realized that the whole of this part of the world and west of Scotland and Cornwall was peopled, as it were, with trees and plants from the Southern Hemisphere, and especially Chile, Tasmania, Argentina. And we started, and some of these you will see on this vision, on this screen.
So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Daphne. We saw the images there. They really are, they seem to be, it's a wonderful time of the year for the flowers, isn't it? As a sort of a burst of color.
Well, this is it. And yes, and of course the granary border and the kitchen garden, which I think we haven't got images for. But yes, full of color now. And there should be the images with the poppies, the delphiniums, and I think that is shown.
Yeah.
Yes, and so we've got herbaceous, a lot of herbaceous at this time of the year, and then a late herbaceous bulb, and a rose with a little summer house too.
Fantastic. So thanks, Daphne. That was great.
Always buy much more than you can chew.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you for showing Savannah Percy. We appreciate it. So Marianne, back to yourself.
Well, I think you're going to, at least I know you're going to have a talk by the man in charge in Mountstuart. But I just want to very briefly mention, because that is the next garden, was the next garden on our list, that Mountstuart, 98 acres, is one of the most important gardens in Europe. And it's an incredibly important house historically. It's the home of the Londonderrys, and one of the Londonderry figures, Lord Castlereagh, very famous for his leading the British delegation at the Treaty of Vienna after the Napoleonic Wars to settle out, you know, to replan Europe, literally. And they have the seats from the Treaty of Vienna. He was allowed to take back all the chairs that all the dignitaries sat on, and they have them in Mountstuart. Mountstuart is probably famous for many things. It was, sorry, just another note on Lord Castlereagh. He was the same man who was very involved in the putting down of the United Irishmen's revolt in 1798, which ironically enough, again, was started off, it was almost like the Boston Tea Party, by French Huguenots who were living in the north of Ireland. And the original meeting for the United Irishmen was in Cave Hill, just overlooking Belfast city. And Lord Castlereagh was ruthless in his putting down of the United Irishmen. And he demonstrated by torturing them on the bridges of Dublin how people would be treated if they were caught as being United Irishmen. And one of his captives was the leader of the movement, a man called Wolfe Tone. And he, rather than being treated as or killed as a common criminal, executed himself in prison. And ironically, in 1822, Lord Castlereagh followed his example and executed himself, or committed suicide. Shelley, the poet, Lord Alfred Shelley, he was a propagandist for the United Irishmen, and he wrote a little ditty about Viscount Castlereagh. I met murder on the way. He had a smile like Castlereagh. Lady Edith Somerville, who married a descendant of Viscount Castlereagh, she was the really creator of Mountstuart. It's a 98-acre garden. As I said, it's one of the most important gardens in the whole of Europe. And it is Edith, who was also very, very involved in kind of being the central figure on all of the behind the scenes talk about war, about the incipient war that was about to happen in Europe. And many times her guests were people like Neville Chamberlain and also Winston Churchill. Winnie the Warlock, she called Winston Churchill. And she had this, what's called an ARC club, which was for these people so that they could kind of talk amongst themselves in this club-like fashion. And in one of the areas of the garden, the Dodo Terrace, which is planted with camellias and crenodendrons, she created these figures in concrete of mythical animals, creatures. In each one was to represent either people like Neville Chamberlain, Winston Churchill, and even Samuel Beckett, who was in the French resistance movement, as well as being a brilliant writer. He was included in the Art Club. She herself was Circe, the sorceress, as part of these mythical creatures. And I know that you're going to be talked about at length about the garden. And another visitor actually at pre-war was a man called Colonel Ribbentrop, representing the German interests. And many of you will have read or seen Isagura's book or seen the film The Remains of the Day with Anthony Hopkins, which is based on Colonel Ribbentrop and his dining in Mountstuart. So then we go on now along the Causeway Coast. And I would just like to mention on the Causeway Coast on the way that there's the famous Bushmills factory, a Bushmills distillery rather than factory, which was developed in 1608. And I do remember that visiting the Giant's Causeway with a group one time, the specialized guide for the Causeway didn't turn up. So we ended up having a liquid guide in Bushmills distillery instead, which is far more beneficial and pleasing to everyone. But the Causeway Coast itself, which was supposedly formed as stepping stones by Finn McCool, who is going to fight the giant, who was his notorious enemy over in Scotland, very close to some parts of the north of Ireland. It's only 15 miles across to Scotland. So he formed these giant stepping stones so that he could walk all the way across to Scotland and meet with his enemy. And actually, when he was approaching the enemy, his wife realized, and he realized, that the giant on the other side was twice the size of Finn McCool. So his wife hastily put him in a makeshift pram, Finn McCool, and she covered him with her shawl. So when the other giant met him, he looked at this baby and he saw this giant baby and he thought, my God, the father must be 3 times the size of me. And he ran all the way back to Scotland. That is not quite how the Giant's Causeway was formed. It was formed by 60 million years ago by a volcanic eruption, very slow cooling eruption, which caused through fissures, which caused these extraordinary formation of columns to stand out of the water. And one of the formations on one of the cliff edges is like a giant organ. Extraordinary place with wonderful seabirds, eider ducks, which ride the waves like surfers, and eider downs, which we used to use originally. The feathers in the eider downs come from the eider ducks. So now we arrive at another Montgomery house. This is the home of Hugh and Val Montgomery, Ben Varden House and Gardens. And I really sometimes talk laughingly about this as the place to go to, just to have the most wonderful scones with Hugh and Val in the gardens. But it is actually much more than that. It is the oldest, or one of the oldest, continually used and continually developed wall gardens that exists. It dates from 1788. It has never changed from being a wall garden. And what is beautiful about it, it is intersected by a serpentine-like pools and waters and streams. And it has also almost like a river of grass running through it. And it has also the most beautiful plantings in it. Glasshouse full of really exploding peaches is the only way to describe them, and grapes and fat tomatoes. And as we see here, a separate vegetable garden, which is planted with mathematical precision, is the only way to describe it. It's lovely, lovely series of arches covered by scented roses. So every sense in you is sated really with the beauty of the garden. You've got the sense of smell, you've got your salivation. This bridge, which we're looking at here, is from 1878 and was built by one of the Montgomerys who lived in this house. And it's an iron bridge and it's quite magnificent in style. It's a garden which, as I say, fills every sense. It's got lovely wild areas around the lake area there. It's got precise plantings of the vegetables, and it equally has got this overflowing glasshouse with fully ripened plants, which cause you to salivate as you walk by. So we are then going along over across towards Lough Erne, and we are going to Fermanagh and Tyrone. So we cross over via Derry. And in fact, I didn't mention that John Paul Getty came from Londonderry. That's another one of those Scots-Irish. And then we are coming to the house of Baronscourt when we arrive in Tyrone. He's still in Tyrone. That house is just on the edge of Tyrone in County Fermanagh. And I'd just like to kind of give a quick summary of this area of Tyrone and Fermanagh, well, particularly Fermanagh. It's the Lake District. It's the equivalent of Wordsworth's Lake District in Ireland. It has more water in it than it has land in it. And every house, its aspect is looking out on the lake. And we're later going to go to Crom Castle, which is very much involved in the lake itself. Now, coming into Baronscourt, Baronscourt is the home of the Hamilton family, again, a Scots-Irish family. They are related to the Crichtons, who lived in, who live still, sorry, John, in Crom Castle. And this house was originally built by a good Scottish architect. And but that was in the 1770s. By 1796, that house had completely been gutted by fire. And the Hamiltons, I have such incredible feeling about the Hamiltons and what they have done for Ireland. And I know that we are meeting up with James's son, Nicholas, when you go to Belle Isle at the end of the whole webinar. But the Hamiltons then used two Cork architects, William Richard Morris and his son William Vitruvius Morris. And they were the specialists in really neoclassical but Greek revival architecture. You saw at the beginning that giant portico. I can tell you, when you arrive in front of that giant red sandstone portico that you saw on the first slide, you can imagine you feel tiny and you feel totally overawed by it. And then you come in to the hall area, and the first thing you're greeted by in the hall is a rocking horse. And you feel immediately reassured and back to norm. But what's striking in the hall is this extraordinarily beautiful Greek revival plasterwork. It is absolutely, every detail of it is so beautiful. And at the back there, you see paintings by Thomas Lawrence of the famous, infamous Lady Emma Hamilton. She was given really by an ex-lover to Sir William Hamilton to be his wife, unfortunately for him. And he was representing Britain in Naples. She lived with him, and to Naples came Horatio Nelson. And she decided that she much rather Horatio Nelson than she did her husband. Horatio Nelson was suffering from tuberculosis from a campaign in Egypt. She nursed him to health. And after the Battle of Trafalgar, when he'd lost an arm and most of his teeth, he came back, and she and Horatio Nelson decided they would go away to live together. So Lawrence painted her painting. She was absolutely stunningly beautiful. And that is the representation that you see there. The most beautiful probably room in Barons Court is the Rotunda. And the Rotunda has a Pantheon-like high dome. And you sit in the Rotunda and you have your meal in the Rotunda. And it is absolutely so perfection in terms of architecture. And on top of the dome is a very high lantern skylight. So it's not a dark area. It's letting in light with this, again, exquisite plasterwork. Now, James Abercorn's late wife, Sasha Abercorn, was a direct descendant of Alexander Pushkin, the Russian poet, and also direct descendant of the last Tsar of Russia. So she's a Romanov, as well as being direct descendant of Pushkin. And because of that, and she was also the goddaughter of Lord Louis Mountbatten, amazing connections. There's wonderful Russian pieces, furniture, paintings, silver pieces in the house itself. And yet it's not an austere house. And what makes it wonderfully quirkily non-austere is that David Hicks in 1975, who is also related to the Mountbattens, was brought in to create a very informal family room out of a very formal room. And he set up a room with a series of brightly colored partitions and the kitchen at the back of it. And here the family can use it for different purposes and sit in lounges in one part of it, eat in another part, and just enjoy themselves overall. I say that James Abercorn has been extraordinary for Ireland. He has opened up this house to people, and Sasha too, to people from every hue and every religion in Ireland, and every amazingly kind of creative, artistic people have been invited to this house. And he, through Sasha, she set up the Pushkin Prize of Poetry in every school, multiple schools in the north of Ireland, and brought children from the Protestant communities and the Catholic communities together to meet for the very first time, working together to create poetry and to try and win the Pushkin Prize. And when trouble in the north of Ireland was fairly strong, James bought Belle Isle to develop it as a venue for people to come and visit the north of Ireland. So extraordinary man, an extraordinary man for the north of Ireland. And we now leave Barons Court, and we are just checking where we're going to next. Where are we going to next?
We're going to Killyrea, but we have a lovely, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
We have a lovely video as well to see,
Yeah.
and we also have Katie Hamilton and Anthony, I think, there as well, who will also tell us a little bit more maybe after we see the video.
I will, yeah.
We play the video and you can get a well-deserved glass of water, Marianne.
Give me a second, I just get the video.
Brilliant. So this is an ideal itinerary if you have a small group of people, maybe, you know, 6, 8 or 10 people or 12 people who'd like to travel around and, you know, have an opportunity to really enjoy what these properties offer. And a lot of them are hidden gems. Like, people don't know about things like this when they come to Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it's really, you know, important that if you can and you have the right type of clients, that you include these type of properties on the itinerary. So do we have it there, Gio?
Yes, let's get that on.
Hello, we're Anthony and Katie Hamilton, and we very much look forward to welcoming you to Killyrea House. Killyrea was built around about 1820, we think, so that makes it halfway between Georgian and Victorian. Members of my family have lived here since the late 1950s.
So this is a whistle-stop tour of the house, which you've got to appreciate has been in lockdown and toddler mode for the past year and a half. But guests would come into this hall, they're welcomed by mum and dad. They might have a refreshing drink in here in the drawing room. Dad talks about the art throughout the house. With guests, we usually have a lovely open fire lit to welcome them. And then if it's a beautiful day, guests go on out through the drawing room and into the garden down here. The dining room is a fantastic space for more formal dining. We can seat 12 people in here. Obviously, at the moment, it's in full lockdown mode with plenty of projects underway on the dining room table, but it makes a wonderful space. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to show you is a more informal space at Killyrea. We've converted the old stable block, which used to house my brother and I's ponies, into this wonderful outdoor-indoor dining area. So you can see we've kept the old walls as they used to be. We've got some fantastic light fittings. There's a wonderful high ceiling in this room. At the end, we've got a wood burner, which makes it a very cozy space. And we're set up today for a family lunch of just 6 of us. But this space can accommodate up to 40 people easily. And it makes a great option if you're after a slightly less formal indoor dining experience in the main house, or if it's a really hot summer day and you want to make full advantage of the wonderful views in the garden.
When we first arrived at Killyrea about 33 years ago, all really that remained of the garden was this balustrade and a large expanse of grass below, surrounded by trees and a hedge. We tried to keep this area as natural as possible, and rather inspired by the green lake theory, we have created a series of islands and inlets and rivers of grass. And so there are lots of hidden parts you can't see on this video, in round the corners, and many, many paths and nooks and crannies, all with lots of colours. Particularly good in the spring, and again in the autumn. I try to keep this top border with colour and interest right through the year. We're very, very lucky to have wonderful swallows nesting in through this archway, and just wonderful bird life altogether. when our guests arrive, we greet them off the bus. They come into the main house for a refreshing drink and a look at some of the paintings of family portraits and things. And then, depending on the weather, we maybe sit outside for a little while and have the garden, according to the time of day, maybe do a tour of the garden and then go into the garden room for lunch, or the other way around if that suits better. I'm just going to quickly show you the vegetable garden if there's time on this video. And just on our way, wonderful display of catmint and roses and honeysuckle all mixed up together. Bees working away, you can hear them, you probably can't on this, but you can hear them humming loudly. And here we are in the vegetable garden. So as you can see, we're going to be doing a lot of very healthy eating in the future, and do hope we might be able to entertain some of you at some stage to lunch in our lovely garden room. Slugs permitting, we hope to offer all our guests the produce from this when they come to dine with us.
I think Katie said it all there, because the food that you get when you go to Killyrea is stunningly good. She didn't mention that Anthony makes lovely brown bread as well to go with the wonderful vegetables in the garden. Just a quick, as we go to Crum Castle, and I'm going to just mention that there are amazing boat trips that you can take from Enniskillen and even from Crum Castle itself to the islands. One of the islands I adore visiting is Devonish Island, which has a monastic site settlement there founded by Saint Malatia in the 6th century. The Vikings came and raided it. And then in the 12th century, Augustinian Priory was set up there. And you see marvelous remains of the a round tower and some of the 12th century buildings, etc. And it is a wonderful trip to make. Then we come to Crum Castle.
Giovanna, we do have a photo of the island that you can show, and then maybe we go back to Katie just to say a few words to people as well.
Okay, sorry, I thought you was.
Right. Yeah.
Apologies about that.
Don't worry. We have a photo of the island. Well, we go back to Katie first, and then we'll see the island. So thank you very much for that video. It was a great, a lot of comments coming in there that it's a very informal, relaxing place, and there's a sense of place that we got from the video, which was great, and the family. But what exactly can you do for clients when they're visiting?
Well, I think we offer them quite a sort of a different experience, because all other houses that they're going to are generally really wonderful architectural gems. I think what they're coming to see when they come to us is more, well, a working
family home,
and a working farm actually too, and the business of outdoor, lots of areas of wonderful wild flowers. I think the fashion for gardening has suddenly caught up with our garden, really, because as you go down through our garden, it becomes wilder and wilder, and I do love my wildflowers. And so at the moment, for instance, we've got masses of orchids and daisies and all sorts of lovely things out in front of the house. So it sort of has quite a lot of contrast. We've got the more formal bit at the top of the garden, and then the spring garden, and then going down. In the spring, we have camellias and rhododendrons and all those sort of plants. And there's a bit of interest all the year round. That's what I'm endeavouring to have.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So for
I apologise slightly for the video, because it was made, as I think I explained, in a big rush with the noises of a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old in the background. So it was a bit tricky.
No, it was perfect, because it gives people a true sense of sort of the atmosphere and the ambience of the property as well, in the gardens. So that's brilliant. So back over to you, Marianne. But Gio, I know we do have a photo of that island there.
We're just going to show a photograph of the island, which I described, I think. Is that correct, Siobhan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the presentation, the PowerPoint. Just to give, because it's a beautiful shot. And that is, again, it's one of the hidden gems of Fermanagh. I think Fermanagh is really an underappreciated county in Northern Ireland.
Fermanagh is, to me, the most amazing county in the north. Not just because of its series of amazing houses, but that is something extraordinary. But the fact that the lake intervenes everywhere is a piece of magic.
Yeah. You might have
the island.
Yeah, I don't know. It should be there somewhere, but maybe we'll come
well,
across.
We can forget it. We can forget it. We can go on.
Do you want to move on to Marianne, on to Crum Castle? And then
I would, certainly. Yeah.
Perfect.
Crum Castle is, sorry, we've gone up, the screen is wrong. Yeah. Crum Castle is the home of the Crichton family. The Crichton family are related to the Balfour family. Many will know of the Balfour name with the Balfour Declaration associated with Israel and Palestine. And when you go to Crum Castle, there remains, it looks like a folly actually, doesn't it, John, of a 17th century Balfour castle on the lake. And it actually was lived in, I think, by the Crichtons when they originally came here in the 17th century. And then they moved in to the incredible Crum Castle itself. Crum Castle is a Tudor revival house built by this now Scots-Irish family, the Crichtons. And I often say no Gothic need apply to the Scots-Irish because the Gothic is associated with Italy and Rome and all that kind of thing. But it is the most romantic of houses. You go in the door and you're greeted with this almost like cathedral-like hall. And there's John and Harriet, his wife. And then you have this baronial staircase. I mean, it's so impressive and so, I suspect, overawing, but it is a house full of welcome, full of fun, and full of joy. I have stayed there many times with people who have absolutely loved every moment of their stay there. It has a library, which we're looking at there, which you just sink into. In terms of the lovely seats, the lovely warm, easy seats that you sink into, you read a book, you feel totally informal in what could be a most formal house. It has none of the feeling of formality about it. The hall that we saw briefly there has marvelous armorial stained glass windows all around it, which gives you that kind of cathedral feeling to it. And then John's father, who was Lord Lieutenant also Fermanagh, he was the one who really, he brought, as far as I know, am I correct in saying this, John, electricity and to yes, the house first ever time. Sorry.
Another thing, just fighting there with the phone, the John and Harriet can also host clients. So it's really having a wonderful opportunity to be hosted, for 2 nights, 3 days, privately in the property. And it's something that our clients really, really adore. And in fact, many have come back a second time. So as well as, clients including this in itinerary, when they're doing a tour of Northern Ireland, it's also possible to be hosted. Which is a wonderful opportunity, which you don't get in many houses. So Marianne, back to yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just was going to, exactly as Siobhan is saying, John brings you around the property himself, and he gives that very, very personal touch to the whole feeling of being really a private guest in his house. There's a west wing you can stay in, or you can stay in the house itself. And in 2012, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, was a guest in this house. There was also a P.G. Wodehouse series called Blandings, which was filmed in the house. And The gardens themselves are now run by the National Trust, but they are incredibly beautiful. And of course, they lead out onto Lough Erne, where you've got this very big Victorian boathouse, almost battlemented boathouse, where you take your little out and go out on the lake itself for a small trip on the lake. And indeed, John's father, as far as I remember, the coffin was taken in that little boat and taken across to a church on one of the islands. So that's really all I can say about Crum, but to say that it is such a special visit, and it's such a beautiful property at the same time.
So John, do you have a few words to add?
Oh, well, I don't really have after that amazing story by Marianne, who's a wonderful ambassador, as you are as well, Siobhan, to us. I will echo everything that Marianne has said. We are a home, not a hotel, and we love entertaining clients. We're very bespoke. We've got a fantastic team that look after us. So, you know, you're not staying in a hotel. You can do this off the beaten track on your wonderful itinerary through Ireland. We can do a small group where Harriet and I host together and you're with us all the time, or you can take the whole castle, sleeping now up to 23 people, fully catered and staffed. But Marianne's got it all in one. It's a home and the feeling. And, you know, this place was built as a sailing lodge. It was a party house. And we very much want people to feel when they come here that they can enjoy it, relax. It's totally exclusive. So you're not bumping into other people you don't know apart from ourselves and our staff. So we really, really would love to welcome any of your clients to come and stay. And with my cousins at Belle Isle and Barons Court and lovely Killyrea, we can take you over there to have tea with Lord and Lady Anthony and their lovely gardens. Nicholas and Tatiana are down the lake at Belle Isle. And of course, my father's first cousin, the Duke, at Barons Court. So there's lots to do. And as we said earlier, these are sort of hidden gems, which we can unlock doors for.
Fantastic. Thanks a million, John. So
my pleasure.
Thank you. So Marianne, will we head over and talk first to Nicholas about Belle Isle, and then you can cover the areas maybe that he doesn't cover?
Certainly, with pleasure.
Thank you. So hi, Nicholas, you're going to tell us about Belle Isle, because we haven't never had Belle Isle either on the webinar before. And it's a wonderful exclusive use property that's just hidden away in Fermanagh.
Absolutely. It is a hidden gem, this part of Northern Ireland. And we are exactly on Upper Lough Erne, just a short boat ride down the lake from John, my cousin. His father and my father are first cousins, or were first cousins whilst he was alive. Belle Isle itself is an island, a 470-acre island estate. It's designated a special area of conservation. It's entirely private, and the castle itself was built in the 17th century and can host parties up to 27 people. And my wife, Tatiana, and I moved back from New York last year. We were there for 16 years, and are very happy to be back in Northern Ireland. And we would be very happy to host dinner parties or a lunch party, whatever suits you. Sorry, we've got children running in and out here. Sorry about this. Come on in, Tony. Come on.
Hello.
Just off school, so we've got lots of multitasking going on. So apologies.
Don't worry. Do you have images then to show us as well?
Yes, I think Giovanna was going to bring them up, please.
Will I show the video first and then we show the presentation?
Okay, we can show a video of the castle, please. Yeah. again, I just seen hello again. I've just seen a question there from Alana, I think, asking about whether there's sheep in the front, and there were indeed. I'm actually trying to build up a working farm here. So I'm looking into investing in a herd for beef cattle, some woodland raised chickens, and we also have some pigs doing an amazing job, special Mangalitsa pigs, clearing ivy from the floor of a couple of our woodlands here. And Belle Isle itself is historically quite important from the scribe McManus clan who used to live here in the 1500s. Cathal McManus was the sponsor of the Annals of Ulster, and they were actually written on Belle Isle Island. And that went on to form the story of the Four Masters, which is integral to our contemporary understanding of Irish history. And that dates back from 590 AD, if you can believe it. Obviously, a lot of that was anecdotal, but stretches through to 1540. So it's fundamental to Irish history, this document, which was written here on Belle Isle. And if we could move along, please, Giovanna. Yeah, and once again, please. So, and we can look through. So one wing of the house, there's two wings in the main castle, is lake facing, and we're lucky enough to have 3 islands, which you can see. We own 3 of those islands on the left, and we'd be very happy to arrange a picnic, should you so wish, on a completely wild, deserted island. Actually, one of them does have sheep, if I'm honest, on it during the summer, and another one used to have cattle swam out to it by a local farmer, which is quite an amazing, almost medieval sight. And if we could go along again, please, Giovanna. So what 4 bedrooms where that tower is, that's the lake side, as it were, on the left-hand side of the main house. And we can accommodate in the main house 27 guests. We can provide a butler service, should you so wish, and a personal chef. Or it could be for private hire and stuff. And we also are developing a kitchen garden ourselves, which we're very excited about. We invested in a large polytunnel. And so a lot of the food which we serve comes from there. If we can move along, please, Giovanna. This is the main suite, and the majority of our bedrooms are en suite, and 4 have dedicated bathrooms. But like John said, I feel we very much, my father, he hasn't by no means been anti-hotel, but he's always wanted to foster the sense of it being a house and a warm home when you come to stay, rather than a hotel. And so it's very much not a cookie cutter experience. It's very much bespoke. We can fine tune anything to however what your guests require. And we're very flexible on that front. And the lovely minstrels gallery up there, we've had in the past local musicians play. We can have a storyteller, and we can arrange anything.
Nicola,
yes.
Sometimes people don't expect it because it's a beautiful small property. Like it has that, that sense of comfort, and it has everything people want. But you also have like you had an elevator. I'm assuming it's still there, isn't it?
There is indeed, yes. There's an elevator, yeah, absolutely. Or a lift, as I've learned to say since moving over here.
So if you, like, say for example, if there was a multi-gen family and people were less able, it's perfect because they could stay in the main part of the property. Exactly,
Siobhan. Yeah, that's a very good point. Exactly, there is an elevator, and that can exactly fit 4 people, and it's also very handy for the luggage bringing up. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we can accommodate less able people. Absolutely. And we can put on anything from clay pigeon shooting to archery. Obviously, the boat, we're surrounded by water. We've got access to all sorts of boats, and fishing, if you should so wish. Rather gruesome looking pike there. But we have got some amazing fishing on our doorstep. We're very lucky with that. And these are some of the other local attractions. And the Colca Boardwalk Trails, something on the right, is something I still haven't managed to do, which is much to my shame. But the Marble Arch Caves are truly magnificent, and this is all very close by. And again, we can organise tours of these various sites very easily. Yeah.
And there was just one slide there that I think I interrupted you when it was being shown. There was sort of like a 40, it must have been the old cookery school, was it? Have you done something like that?
Oh, that's now a bistro. So that's an on-site restaurant. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
So that's, yeah, absolutely, Siobhan.
So that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Nicholas. That we really appreciate that. So back
Pleasure,
over to
Siobhan.
Thank you. Back over to you, Marianne.
I don't think there's anything more I can say. I've stayed in Belle Isle. I've so enjoyed it. I think Downtown Abbey experience, if any of you have seen that Downtown Abbey series, that is the experience that you enjoy in Belle Isle. It's very, very special. And I know that Nicholas mentioned very briefly there's so much to see in Fermanagh, the two neighbouring great houses, Florence Court and Castle Cool. But Castle Cool is the work of the incredibly important architect, James Wyatt. And it's one of his very rare houses that he architected or designed in Ireland, and even designed a lot of the furniture for it. It's the home of the Earls of Belmore, the Lowry family, the Armour Lowry family. And John Belmore lives still in the garden house attached to Castle Cool. It's now a National Trust property. But so rare to find actually furniture designed by James Wyatt in situ in the place for which he designed it. And the other house by Richard Castle, Florence Court, is Castle Cool is dating from about 1790. Florence Court is 1760, 1764 to be pedantic. And it's by Richard Castles, who designed the Carton House for the Earls of the Dukes of Leinster family, and in County Kildare in the Republic of Ireland, and various other important buildings in Ireland. And the stucco work for Florence Court, the plaster work, is done by Robert West, very much in the Rococo style plaster work. Less ornate and heavy than the Baroque style, but equally done by hand in situ and put up on the ceilings in situ. And beautiful, beautiful plasterwork. These are two stunning, wonderful buildings, houses to visit in the area. So you have so much to do in Fermanagh and the end of Fermanagh in Tyrone, where the Abercorns live, that you could spend days, weeks there and not tire of the enjoyment of visiting it.
That's fantastic. So we can see why, Marianne, people adore traveling with you when they're visiting these houses. And like, if any travel advisors want to put together groups, you know, we'd be delighted to give you an itinerary, and Marianne can, you know, look after your clients when they're being hosted about these wonderful properties and by these wonderful people. So Marianne, is there anything you need to add, or will we move on to hearing more about the National Trust properties?
No, I just want to say come.
Yeah.
Because it is so worthwhile, and come to the north of Ireland. It is such a unique experience, and you don't know Ireland until you've gone to the north of Ireland.
And Marianne, would it be fair to say people are missing out by just tagging on 2 days at the end, thinking
it's huge missing out.
It's done.
Yeah. That whole lake area, you know, I mean, the other side is amazing, but the lake area, you go into that, if you miss that out and just do one small visit to the north, you've missed out enormously on a total experience.
Yeah, and the west of Northern Ireland as well has like in covering, you know, Tyrone and Derry and Fermanagh, really has so much to offer, you know, that people have to go west when they go to Northern Ireland. So a lot of you've heard about National Trust properties throughout all the presentations. So we're very lucky that we have two presenters from the National Trust who are going to fill us in. So we have Neil, and we have Christopher as well.
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Brilliant. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Please, yeah.
Fantastic. There we go. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I feel like I'm being educated in the country that I live in and adore, and I feel like a traitor. I'm actually from Tyrone, so I'm just in love with all of the wonderful Tyrone and Fermanagh properties. So but my job today is to talk about County Down. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of our beautiful places in the National Trust in Northern Ireland with you. And I hope that they really are of some interest, because they really are just beautiful and wonderful places. And as you say, the National Trust has been talked about during the presentation, but I'm pretty aware that a lot of your clients won't know who we are or what we do. So I thought it'd be interesting to just begin with that. The National Trust is a conservation charity founded in 1895, and it endeavours to conserve and preserve our built heritage, countryside and coastline for everyone forever. So it's a big job for everyone forever, but a good one. With every visit to one of our properties, you will help to protect our very special charitable work, and you will contribute to the preservation of Northern Ireland's built and natural heritage for generations to come. And as you've already said, today, my colleague Christopher and I will be sharing two of these really special places with you, both in the ancient county of Down. So if I move on to the next slide, the first of these is the place that I call home, which is Castle Ward. It's seat of the Viscount and Viscountess Bangor in the Peerage of Ireland. And since I took on the role of collections and house manager, it has been my home with my partner Chris and our blonde lurcher Sebastian, who will be delighted to meet anyone who comes to the front door of Castle Ward. It's located just 2 hours from Dublin, north of Dublin, on the picturesque shores of Strangford Lough. For centuries, notable people in history have come to marvel at the natural landscape and unrivaled views, to be seen, I believe, anywhere that I've experienced in Ireland. The very famous diarist and artist Mary Delaney visited Castle Ward many times in the 18th century, proclaiming in her world-famous diaries in 1762 that it hath every advantage that nature that can be desired. So pretty good coming from the lady herself. Amazingly, the natural landscape has remained largely unchanged for almost 300 years, and the theatricality of your guests' experience will begin at the entrance gates, where they will witness the unveiling of the dramatic vistas in true 18th century aristocratic style. Okay, so it really is a house of contrasting sides. So situated at the very center of the estate is Castle Ward, an 18th century Georgian masterpiece of architectural design, a house unique on the island of Ireland and famous for its fusion of two very fashionable and distinctive architectural styles. It was completed in and around 1766, and the entrance front to the house is Palladian, classical, and reminiscent of an Italian palazzo. I often think, being beside the water and standing on the classical side of the house, you could be in a Venetian palazzo. The opposite side is a daring experiment of the Georgian Gothic, and that's Gothic with a K, with OG windows and fantastical plasterwork. The theatricality that is played out in the architecture, I believe, is truly entertaining and is a must-see for those visiting Northern Ireland. This is Bernard and Anne Ward, the first Viscount and Viscountess Bangor, and they're important to our story and really, really interesting in themselves, because in Castle Ward, there's been an argument going on since eternity of why we have two differing styles, why Gothic on one side and why classical on the other. And even this sort of debate is hugely entertaining for all our visitors. And I think this sort of architecture gives an interesting insight into the wild and unabandoned imagination and extravagances of the Irish Georgian aristocrat. But it was built for these two, Bernard and Anne Ward, and the house came to represent their apparently acrimonious marriage and differing tastes. She had been sort of slated for having relationships with a woman prior to her marriage. Her husband was said to be a philanderer and having it off with the local vicar's wife. But I just don't buy that. I think that they were incredibly well versed in architecture. They had traveled really widely, and what they really wanted to do was create something truly sublime. Like many of their contemporaries, they were both deeply interested in architecture and in the theatre and symbolism that this evoked whenever anyone came to the property. So when you visit Castlereagh today, you will experience this fascinating new narrative that it's not just a Frankenstein's monster developed out of a sort of acrimonious marriage. It is in fact a piece of theatre and a sublime fusion of two amazing, innovative and incredible designs. Okay, so here we are inside the house, and I thought it'd be nice to show two of the most sort of interesting rooms. The theatricality of Castle Ward continues within, with the interiors proving every bit as entertaining as the exteriors. In few historic houses in the world is it possible to see, on the one hand, fine and delicate 18th century classical plasterwork, such as the Irish Georgians have tried to save for many years now and sought to protect in the 20th century. But it's also, on the other hand, they can come and witness the fantastical plasterwork of the Georgian Gothic. And just to give you an idea of one of our ceilings, which is truly, truly amazing. This is the boudoir, Lady Anne's private sitting room in the 18th century, and it is quite literally billowing tents of plasterwork. And I love this because it's drawn from Eastern architecture. And you know, they're sort of the family coat of arms, and their motto refers to the Crusades, and so this idea of sort of this Eastern Gothic architecture is really important. And obviously in the house we also have representations of Western Gothic as copied from the Henry VII Chapel in Westminster Abbey. Lady Anne's family were descended from King James II, and her family are buried in the chapel in Westminster Abbey. I'll just move on to the next slide and the last slide. So here we have a nice view of the house. What will guests have whenever they come here? What can they expect? Guests will experience a private, extended and expert tour of the house and collection with dedicated time with the collections and house manager, that is me, to discuss the very special history of Castle Ward and its grand surroundings. Items of collection not normally seen by the public can be laid out for them to view by special request. Access to rarely seen historic kitchens, butlers' pantries, wine cellars, because they're interesting too, as well as our sumptuous public rooms and family bedrooms can be on show. As valued guests, we can facilitate a drinks reception in two of the most impressive rooms, which you've seen in the PowerPoint, in the house, the classical music room and the Gothic saloon. And I should say the Gothic Saloon has the most amazing panoramic views over Strangford Lough. I mean, it's my favorite place to position myself in the evening with the dog and a glass of wine. It is really beautiful. Upon conclusion of their time at Castle Ward, guests can enjoy a picturesque 10-minute ferry ride across Strangford Lough, which is really good fun. And after a short drive just up the road, they will arrive at Mount Stuart. And I think as I get to Mount Stuart, I will hand over to my colleague Christopher to tell you a little bit more about that.
I am so envious of your job, Neil. It's amazing. Fantastic.
I know, I feel like a lucky boy.
Coming out with the gossip and the stories, but you were. So I'd say it'd be great to spend some time going through Castle Ward with you beside me.
Thank you.
For those of you just who have been on webinars before and would have heard of Ballywalter, Ballywalter is very close as well to Mount Stuart. So you would have met, oh my God, I'm getting a blank. Not Mulrooney, Mulholland's in Ballywalter on previous webinars.
On to Mount Stuart, Christopher?
Yes, hello. You can hear me, hopefully.
Yes, we can.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you, Neil, for introducing me. I'm the property curator for the National Trust at Mount Stewart, so a slightly different role to that of Neil. And it seems that Marianne is actually competing for my job. It seems that she knows the history almost as well as me, or if not better than me. So thank you for that good introduction, Marianne. So, excuse me, welcome to Mount Stewart, the historic family home of the Marquises of Londonderry. And it's now the home to Lady Rose Lauritsen and her husband, American art historian Peter Lauritsen. Mount Stewart was the centre of the Irish estates of the Londonderrys, with further estates in England, and until the 1960s, they also owned a rather magnificent townhouse on Park Lane in London. Just to give some context to where we are, in the centre there we have a map of Strangford Lough. Mount Stewart is right at the very top. Castle Ward is at the bottom. You can see the ferry, the 10-minute ferry crossing from one side to the other that Neil was talking about. And if Daphne Montgomery at Grey Abbey is still here, the Grey Abbey estate is just it's basically the next door, then the next door neighbours of Mount Stewart, to give you some perspective. So right over in the eastern side of Northern Ireland. What that means is that the warm currents of the Gulf Stream whoosh round the top of Ireland, and they actually come up into Strangford Lough, creating an amazing microclimate. So both Grey Abbey and, more importantly for my talk, that creates the fabulous opportunities for gardens. So as a result, oops. There we go. There are 90 acres of formal and informal gardens here at Mount Stewart, including the Spanish Garden, the Rose Garden, the lake overlooked by Tir na nOg, which we can see in the top right-hand corner. Tir na nOg is the Londonderry's private burial ground, named for the Irish mythological land of youth, a land that knows no sorrow and where nobody ages. And the current residents, Lady Rose and her husband, Mr. Peter Lauritsen, have their spots marked out, which hopefully won't be needed for some time to come. Overlooking the nearby loch in the centre at the bottom of my screen, with views across to the Mourne Mountains to the south and Scrabo Tower to the north, is the Temple of the Winds, created by 18th century architect James Stewart. And it's considered one of the best neoclassical buildings on the island of Ireland. Overlooking the south of the house are members of the Ark, which Marianne touched on earlier. And here we can see in the top left-hand corner 2 dodos perched on the gates to the formal gardens at the south of the house. The Ark was a private club created by Edith, 7th Marchioness of Londonderry, grandmother to the current resident Lady Rose. The Art Club brought together people from all walks of life, including writers like J.M. Barrie and W.B. Yeats, politicians Neville Chamberlain and Winston Churchill, whose grandmother was a Londonderry, and artists such as Sir John Lavery and John Singer Sargent. Each ARC member was given a name linked to an animal. So as we heard from Marianne earlier, Sir Winston Churchill was known as Winston the Warlock, and Edith's husband, Charles Londonderry, as Charlie the Cheetah, relating to both his attitude to their marriage and his personal liveliness and beauty. Edith was Circe the sorceress from Homer's Odyssey, a goddess who would drug travelers who came to her island and turn them into animals so they could never leave. So an animal statue of each member of the Art Club can be found in the gardens, confirming Homer's tale. So moving inside, a number of images of interiors. When Edith, Lady Londonderry, made Mount Stewart her home in the early 20th century, she wrote to her husband, Charles, "This is the most divine house. Why do we live anywhere else?" And from the 1920s to the 1950s, Edith Londonderry tastefully transformed many of the interiors of Mount Stewart, much of which can still be seen today, having undergone a major conservation project a number of years ago. The house is an accredited museum and contains a collection of international importance, telling the story of national and international significance. Here we can see portraits by Sir Thomas Lawrence, including that in the bottom right-hand corner. Another one by Sir John Lavery, the next one along, which shows Lavery's wife. And then in the center bottom, we can see a painting of the south front of the house by Philip de Laszlo. And in the top left, we can see Lady Rose, who is actually standing beneath another portrait of her grandmother by the same artist. Displayed in the central hall, we can see in the top center a sculpture of Venus by Lawrence MacDonald, and those in the niches are by Lorenzo Barellini. In the dining room in the top right, as well as Napoleon, who is the small figure in the round frame to the right of the center, we can also see other family portraits, including the Countess of Albemarle, who is the very large portrait on the right-hand side. The Albemarles were, or are in fact, ancestors of, as we know, of Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, and her distant cousin and resident Lady Rose. We can also see the interior in the bottom left of the Temple of the Winds that I showed you from the outside a moment ago. And this is available for exclusive dining, afternoon teas, etc., etc., enabling you to enjoy the panoramic views over Strangford Lough. As well as this, coupled with private catering, we can offer bespoke personal tours of both the gardens and the interiors, covering art history, political history, general history, furniture history, etc. And these can be arranged and led by curators, conservation staff, or gardeners. And to rival Castle Ward, we could also bring out items of interest to the group. Lady Fingal, in her autobiography, wrote, "England was ruled largely from the quiet and dignified rooms of Mount Stuart. All the great statesmen of the time came." And I'll end with one further quote from Lady Rose's grandmother, Edith Londonderry, in which she wrote to her husband, "I do love this place so deeply. It is indeed the land of heart's delight." Thank you.
That was brilliant, Christopher. Thank you very, very much. It really is a fantastic, stunning property, and the gardens are amazing. It's also something that if people were like, if they're only spending a few days in Northern Ireland and they're basing themselves in Belfast, it's a wonderful day trip, isn't it, to visit? Like, it only takes, what, an hour and a half, an hour?
From Belfast, I live in Belfast. I'm here in 20 minutes. Okay.
Like, if they were to leave in the morning, how long would it take? If they leave at
half an hour is a decent time to get to Mount Stuart. And then from Mount Stuart on, Grey Abbey, as I said, is 5 minutes. And then the ferry is probably half an hour from here. At the moment, the ferry sailings are dependent on the number of people who require to cross. But I think in normal times, there's a scheduled timetable.
Siobhan?
Yes?
Could I just say a little bit about the garden there, because Christopher has left me feeling a little frustrated because the garden is so sensational. And they have a wonderful Italian garden and a Spanish garden with the casita and a pool reflecting in its shape the roof of the casita. And also the planting in the garden, it's 98 acres. Is that correct, Christopher, the garden itself?
Just a little bit under, yeah.
Just a little bit under. But and they also employed at one stage Gertrude Jekyll for the sunken pool garden. She provided the design, but they rejected her plantings, and they
felt it was too suburban.
Planted themselves, and wonderful wild areas. It's a stunningly beautiful garden. Just the trees alone.
It's actually considered, you commented on it being one of the best in Europe. It's actually listed as one of the top 10 in the world.
It's extraordinary, the garden. And that would take you a whole day to walk around. in itself. And the house, as Christopher said, is so interesting to visit because of the family history. And Lady Edith, who was this terrifying suffragette lady, founder of the Women's League, as well as everything else. The house, her presence and the presence of other owners have permeated this house in a wonderful way. So that's all I wanted to say, just to add to it.
That's brilliant. So I hope everyone got a good feel for like what awaits when you're in Northern Ireland. Like, there is so much to do. We have 2 itineraries that we put together on, we put them on our website. Now, we refer to Northern Ireland as well as Upper Ireland, because it's really, you know, when you visit Northern Ireland, you tend to do the top half of Ireland. And there's an itinerary based on the east side and on the west side, but ideally combine both. And, you know, spend time there. Like, we brought agents on a fam trip and we spent 7 nights and we still didn't show them everything we wanted to show them. And that was like, you know, 1 night here, 1 night there, trying to fit everything in. So, you know, people can spend a good 10 days there and still, you know, there's a few things that they could see after they've left. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much to all the presenters. I don't know if there's any questions. We went way over our normal time, but I'm glad because a lot was covered and we have the recording to send out to everyone who registered as well. And it's good that they get an in-depth training really on what they can offer clients. You know, the country is opening up. We'll be having, you know, our clients from North America back again, from South America and all over the world. So it's great that we have an opportunity to make sure that people are aware of what there is for them when they come to Northern Ireland. So maybe we'd wrap it up if any of the presenters want to say anything or if there's any questions. You know, thank you to everyone for attending and to everyone telling us about their wonderful, you know, properties and gardens and the experiences that they offer. And yes, Marion Gorman is a treasure. Like, I don't know how she remembers everything. So you have to make sure that, you know, put a group together. There's fantastic properties to visit. Everyone knows each other. Like, the trip will evolve. It's not just like, you know, doing different things. It'll all come together. You can see how friendly everyone is. They all know each other. So it'll be like they just spent, you know, 10 days, 7 days with friends, and they'll keep those memories and cherish them for a lifetime. So thank you very much, Jill. I think we wrap it up there.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone.
And thanks for Rebecca and Rachel from Adams and Butler as well, who were on the webinar as well, just for doing the spotlight and the research and everything.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.